This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio is brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Centre, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species. Freedom Cruise Canada, rent the boat, own the memories. J&B Cycle and Marine, your home for all things power sports, boats, and equipment. And Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures. Well, howdy, folks. Thank you for joining us. I'm Angelo Viola. He is Peter Bowman.
Yo.
Fresh from a week of Toronto Sportsman Show.
Come on now. We shouldn't be fresh, man. We should be
burned
out big time. But
he is Dean Taylor right there in the middle of your screen. Vova, Nick, everybody's here helping us out. What an exciting program we have today. A little fish talk later on, kiddies.
Woo-hoo! Give me a hell yeah.
Yeah, a little fish talk. Dr. Stephen Cooke will be joining us. For those of you who are not familiar with him, biology professor at Carleton University, has published over 1,200 peer-reviewed papers.
Oh, my.
there's a lot of papers.
I'd like to compare that to other people that have peer-reviewed papers. Like, do a comparison and see who's got them. Like, that's a lot of papers, man.
Yeah, but,
does it take
Crossman, he'd probably have more than that.
Wow.
I would think.
Ooh.
Been around longer, right?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
I don't think he's with us any longer.
No, but I'm just saying.
You're saying before.
Papers are peer-reviewed papers are peer-reviewed papers.
They'd still be there.
Right.
What you're saying, they live on.
Stacked in there like cordwood.
He's also a chairman of the board for technical experts for the Great Lakes. Chair of the board of technical experts for Great Lakes.
Come on now.
Great Lakes Fishery Commission.
Yeah, maybe. Fisheries Commission. And fellow of the Royal Society.
He's a fellow, just like yourself. Now you get the King's coronation.
Give me a hell yeah.
Congratulations on your fine award, my friend.
Well, thank you, my friend.
Well deserved. Have you seen the?
We deserve it.
Have you seen the accolades, the comments on the social media?
No.
Going pretty good.
Yeah, it's
Doing
exploding.
good.
Going real good, actually.
Can I make some money on it? Can I get a buck a piece or something for it?
You can feel good about it.
There's the odd negative one in there too.
Is there?
Oh, yeah,
I gotta
there's a couple
see
of them.
this.
Oh yeah, there's a couple of dickheads out there, but that's part of the game, right? With social.
Anyways, we look forward to speaking to the doc here shortly. We're going to talk about catch and release fishing. Is it stunting fish? Cannibalization, is it causing that? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we need. And of course, the thing with Stephen, he always throws in his own stuff too.
That's the best part of it, the organic nature.
Yeah, baby.
Yay.
But first, Fishing Canada, the store, boy, was it on display last week?
Woo!
Baby.
Come on now.
Yeah. Hey, you're not wearing your gear.
I was hoping you'd comment. Hey? I was hoping you'd comment.
Did you forget?
This maybe.
There you are. You got your gear on.
There
you are. There
Right
and there. So you don't need to have the gear on. I'll just wear the gear this
Isn't
time.
it funny? The number one shirt or hoodie.
That was, okay, the hoodie. Okay, sorry. I was thinking shirt.
We'll talk about that one in a moment.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
But the number one hoodie live
At the sportsman show?
was the same as the number one hoodie online.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's
The Walleye?
Walleye.
The brown one.
The brown one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Caramel.
And it's funny. I called it before we even ordered it.
Oh, yeah. You were the one
I
saying
said,
it.
That's going to be our number one.
I said, it looks like dog poop. I said, it looks like poo-poo, baby poop.
Had a feeling.
And you knew it.
And it was great. And it's sold.
They do look good, I have to say.
Unbelievable.
Wow. But the other one, the freaky one, was that red T-shirt that, I don't know, if it looked like a mistake to me because it almost looked pink.
Well,
and that thing sold off the rack. The
I
first
know,
day
I
it was
know.
almost gone.
that's a UV shirt, right?
Right.
That's the big thing now.
Oh, yeah.
And we only
Oh, yeah.
had the one UV product there. And
The long
sleeve.
solid red sleeves, right?
Yeah.
But wasn't there a short sleeve there as well?
No.
No? Oh, I thought
No.
there was a short sleeve as well. It
no,
was just
that's the
same.
button-down UV shirt.
Oh.
Same as those black ones that we were wearing.
Okay.
Those were all UV as well.
Okay,
But as far as the cool, casual UV material, that was the only one.
Wow.
And it also comes with a hoodie, which we didn't bring there. So now we know. People want
who would have known?
protection.
Who would have thunk?
People want protection. And we are going to give them that
We're going to
protection.
protect you.
So go online, go to the store, fishingcanada.com or shop.fishingcanada.com.
Come on now.
Yeah, now.
And you too can participate in the merriment and joy of wearing your favorite brand.
Loving your gear.
That's it.
Yeah.
Listener feedback, Mr. Bowman. We got a lot of listener feedback live last week, and it's kind of nice to get back to one in print.
This is one that came in from Jonas Olsonvia, right? Does that sound right, boys?
Olsonvia.
Jonas or
Olsonvia.
Jonas? Might be a Jonas. in
Jonas, could be.
there. On YouTube, and this is about our show that just aired in response to our coverage of the Pan American Black Bass Championship.
By the way, can I just interrupt you for one moment? Congratulations to all of the folks who worked on that episode.
Give me a hell yeah.
All the production people.
A lot of hell yeah
both
so far this show.
Field
Holy
and
damn.
post-production. That episode was better than the live event itself.
And the next one is better than that one.
Well, I don't know how
I'm
that's
telling
even
you.
possible.
Well, it is. Just
because I was at the live event, and it was okay. Don't get me wrong. It was fun, but when you see it on the show, man.
In
man.
4K.
Oh,
in all its splendor on a big old screen like that right there.
My God.
It's a pretty damn good deal.
Hey,
that's
who's
for
that
sure.
out there?
That's Bob Azumi.
Bob Azumi.
And Adam Foster right there as
baby.
part of the tournament. They were going into favorites, but they faltered a little bit. It just
Well, maybe we shouldn't give that away for folks who don't know.
I just said a little bit.
Oh, a little
they were
bit.
The favorites,
They
and
fell
they faltered
off
a
the
little
steps
bit.
there off the
so
boat.
I kind of maybe they didn't win the first day.
Okay.
But maybe they won the second day.
All right.
You never know.
All right. You got to watch it to see
never
it.
know.
That's available if you missed it. It's on the Fishing Canada YouTube channel.
Correct.
Come on now.
And
Is it getting some views, Dean?
It's doing really well. It's outpacing our other, I think, all other videos except for the Tomogamy episode.
Wow.
So
And I
it's,
think it would do even better right now as I guess we can speak in real time. The Bassmaster Classic is starting tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
So maybe there's a lot of people worried about that, and they'll come on to that after, because we had Bassmaster elite anglers in there. We had MLF anglers in there. We had the best of the best in there. So you got to check it out. But anyways, Jonas says
Sorry
via
about that.
YouTube, bass fishing tournaments are a great example of how anything can be commercialized. We make money and statistics out of a natural resource that should be fiercely protected. I wish they could weigh and return the fish immediately instead of running back to the stupid weigh-in.
well,
Stupid.
Well, they
Wait.
do. Some do.
Some do.
Some do. Unfortunately, not all of them do, because in order to be able to do a live weigh and dump the fish in the water when you catch it, you have to have a camera on you. You have to have a television product, or at least some kind of video product that you can show people. Otherwise, you're doing it for yourself.
Right.
And these are competitions that generate views and audiences and have advertisers and make some money for some young folks who are getting in the business.
That's right.
Gives them an opportunity to become professional anglers without any of that.
Superstars. They
right.
can become superstars.
They're life altering, and unfortunately, in order to do that, you need to cultivate an audience, and it's pretty hard to do without fish. if
I'll
it's a
tell you
tournament.
what we just mentioned. The Bassmaster Classic is the perfect example of the generation of a live weigh and what it can generate. And he's right. It's about money. It's about but it's like Ange says, about these kids being superstars, becoming even the older guys again returning to superstar status. But like the Bassmaster Classic is a massive live weigh-in event where you bring your fish to the scales, you bring them in the live well, you bring your 5 in. You can release 20 throughout the day, whatever, but you bring your best 5 in, and it's a spectacle of all spectacles. The biggest one of all bass tournaments.
It's a show.
It's a show.
To be at one of those things stays with you all your life.
I would say the only negative would be if there was a negative to the stupid, bringing the fish to the stupid weigh-in. I guess you could say that could be a negative, but they treat these fish pretty good nowadays.
Oh,
I mean, they
my
have
goodness.
additives for the live well. They keep the fish alive with oxygen. It's to the advantage of the anglers to keep them alive. They bring them to the weigh-ins. They have live tanks there with formula in there to help the fish out. They weigh them quickly, and then they get them back in the lake.
I think for the amount of return that those fish bring to the fishing community, to maybe even influencing a young person to change their direction, change their path, and take up fishing for a living. I think for the amount of benefit and return versus, I guess what I'm saying, the ROI is there. The number of fish that potentially are harmed with these weigh-ins is now down to minimal, absolute minimal.
Yep.
So, in as much as I'd like to agree, unfortunately, until we figure out how to have cameras on everybody and then somehow broadcast that and somehow, I don't even know.
The
I don't
MLF
even know because you miss the live audience.
Yeah,
That's the other thing. One of the things that you got, if you ever get a chance to go to one of these big events, one of the things you have to do is look around the audience and look into the kids' eyes when these superstars are coming in with these bags of fish. Just look at those kids' eyes, and it'll tell the entire story that I'm trying to articulate right now, because there's nothing like that child.
And then when a Cooper Gallant's a perfect example. Cooper Gallant is an Ontario boy from Bowmanville, Ontario. He's a young lad. He's the youngest of the Canadians, I believe.
He's the youngest. Is he not the youngest? Period. Right
no,
now?
I think there's a few. I don't know if McKinney and guys like that, but there's another example of Trey McKinney. Guys that are that young. When Cooper walks after he weighs his fish in and walks around at any Bassmaster weigh-in, there are hundreds of kids running up to him for autographs. He's a hero to them. You know what I mean?
Crazy.
This is a young Cooper Gallant that's basically just starting out, and he's already superstar status. So yeah, I mean, we get the hype of it all. MLF does a great job of doing the catch and weigh it on the boat and all that, but it's a television production only, really, right? That's what it's all about.
Millions of dollars worth.
Oh God,
right there.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why. Anyways,
thanks for that, Jonas.
Yeah.
Thanks for your opinion. Thank you so much.
Conservation Corner, Mr. Bowman, my favorite time of day. Conservation Corner brought to you by the Invasive Species Centre.
Come on
This
now.
is your favorite? I bet you Stephen Cook's gonna be more favorite.
He might be, but right now he's not here.
He's
but
so far
they
the
are
favorite.
right today on this show. So
So far, I got you.
this could be my favorite. How's that?
What do you call that guy? What's your nickname for him?
Stench.
I love the stench. That poor guy.
That is a tench, my friend.
It's a bad reputation.
Invasive species galore. They've almost invaded every corner of the planet aside from the Antarctica. That's hard to believe, right? Who can lay claim to that?
Yeah, there's not
many.
There's not many others, is
Only
there?
humans.
Exactly.
Only us.
Only us.
We should bring one over there just so it can have it.
That's right.
Just
then we'd
just
be
for a
equal.
minute, and then it's
For a minute. An orca would eat it anyway, so you don't have to worry about
The tench is a medium-sized, deep-bodied fish, as you can see by this example behind me, with a small scales, rounded fins, and single barbel on each side of its mouth.
These striking olive-colored fish were brought into Canada illegally in 1986. Now, I read something here, Ange, today. I wanted to look it up a little bit.
Well, tell me.
And it says, I read another paper, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it says it was brought to a Quebec fish farm in 1986 and escaped into the Richelieu River, a tributary of the St. Lawrence. But if they were brought into a fish farm, you'd think that would have been legally. Right?
Wow.
But maybe not. It could have been illegal and they wanted it for whatever reason, right?
And what was the reason? Did it say why they were brought in?
Well, fish farm, I don't know. It doesn't say. The above said it is native to Europe and Western Asia, brought into the U.S. for food and as a potential sport fish.
I was going to say, is it consumable?
That's the origin, they say, from in the U.S. and then they came up to here. So, yeah, kind of interesting if that's true.
Yeah. I mean, we have to look into that just to see. I mean, obviously, it's here, and we're not going to do a whole lot of damage to it ourselves because it's not a sport fish. So I don't think there's a sport fishery for it. As you just said, in Europe there is. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think it's one of the more popular ones, right? In the match fishing and all that stuff.
Exactly it. There, another thing I saw today, and looking all this up, I was on the Ontario Fishing Regs. And there was a guy, and there's a picture of him holding a tench. And that thing, I'll bet you, it was 12 to 14 inches at least.
Really?
It was a big one. Like they say 10 to 12 here, but or 8 to 10 or whatever. But I'm telling you, this was looking very like a common sucker size almost.
Wow.
It was big.
The problem with this thing is that it's highly adaptable in new environments, and in most cases outcompetes the native fish like minnows and bullhead and suckers. I was going to say it sounds like a sucker, but they've eaten significant amounts of snails, insects, and other aquatic invertebrates. So you might say, well, so what? That's good. Well, it's not good.
Not good.
Because it doesn't belong there.
That's right.
All of that food normally is consumed by native fish. You see the imbalance there? And that's why it's a big concern.
To learn more about the tench, how to identify them, and visit the Invasive Species Centre website. If you've seen a tench or another invasive species in the wild, report it to the Invading Species Hotline or online at eddmaps.com. eddmaps.com and help keep the waterways free of invaders.
And get rid of the stench at the same time.
Yes.
Come on now.
Whew.
Alrighty, the news brought to you by, this is new, the news brought to you by J&B, your outdoor superstore.
Come on now.
This is new, Dean, right?
Yep, they've now sponsored the news. So every day the news will be brought to you by
They're
them.
all over this podcast.
They get their logo all over the artwork behind you.
J&B Cycle and Marine, Ontario's largest Princecraft and Mercury dealer. They've been supporting customers since 1970. Holy moly.
Wow.
That's older than you and me.
That was a good one.
Eh?
Yeah.
Been around longer than us.
Yeah.
Good God
Yeah.
almighty.
Yeah, we're getting there, though. We're
Outboard
close.
motors to fully equipped boats, Princecraft boats, that is, fishing models, family models, everything you want to do, they've got it. Deck boats. This is also the company that's responsible for the latest craze in boating, and that is leasing boat motor packages at your cottage. Check them out. J&B Cycle.
Fantastic.
J&B, if you're going to look them up on the internet, it's jbcycle.com, not the end.
That's it.
But they're called J&B.
That's
I know
it.
it's a little confusing, but that's
That's
okay.
okay.
jbcycle.com for all your outdoor needs and fun and merriment and all the rest of it.
Fun and merriment.
What's in the news, Mr.
In the
Bowman?
news, as you can see from this beautiful artwork that Mr. Taylor has put
Come
together.
on now.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
you're getting better at this all the time.
Thank you.
Nice gradient there. Look at what this. Like,
It took me forever to get him to use drop shadows, But
There's no drop shadow in that
I
one,
know,
right?
that's why I mentioned it.
You're a drop shadow guy, though. So you're kind of like you have a kind of a drop shadow fetish. If
Well,
I think
I do.
you know,
I do.
you like when you have black text and you put a drop shadow on the black text.
No, you shouldn't do that.
No, oh, you're okay. You're off that one.
Why would
Okay.
you do that?
Well, because you have the fetish. So I thought, you're always asking. Can we change the color of that font so I can have a drop shadow? Brook trout may be able to adapt to hotter weather. Researchers at Penn State University studied how brook trout respond to rising water temperatures due to climate change. They looked at how the fish adjust their biology to survive warmer conditions. So brook trout, in my mind, I'm sure in your mind from all the fishing that we've done from them, and in Dean's mind, is that they're a cold water fish, a cold water species, right? I would assume they're a cool to cold water.
We presume that.
Right.
But then, for every time that we've caught a brook trout in a small little creek that's got maybe a little beaver dam at one end, and the water's muddy and shallow, and that can't be that cold.
Correct.
Yeah,
I would think that too.
But
So-
you're right. We think of them automatically as a cold water.
Yeah, so
preference.
they're having the key findings is their temperature limits. Brook trout start to struggle when the water temperatures rise above 61 Fahrenheit or 16 Celsius. At 68 Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius or higher, they experience serious stress, which can affect their survival. I did not even, to me, if you'd have said 68 Fahrenheit. I still go by Fahrenheit with water temperature. I don't know why I'm weird with that one.
I do
you?
too.
Do you?
I'm the same way.
Everything else I'm good with centigrade and Celsius, but that
Pounds. I'm into pounds too.
Yeah,
I'm still into pounds. Pounds and Fahrenheit.
And inches, for fish. So
And
measuring. I
inches
can't do
too.
centimeters and
let's face it,
millimeters.
we're still stuck
We're
in the
Neanderthal.
70s. okay?
We're definitely old Canada. That's for sure.
Almost gonna puke.
Yeah, Bo's from Europe. He has no idea what any of this stuff is that we go by.
So
That's
what
funny,
is it? So we
funny.
just 3 of us out of 4. Obviously, Volva wasn't brought
Exception.
up with the imperial measurement, but the 3 of us, 3 different ages, and yet we're all. You weren't even born when we were using
And
imperial.
it's weird too because I use miles per hour on the water, but kilometers in the car.
Yep.
That's
Which
true.
It doesn't make any sense.
That's
Totally.
true.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's true. I'm the same way, and I don't think of it.
Yeah. I don't,
And yet you talk pounds when you're talking fish, but I'm assuming you buy your groceries in kilos.
Yep.
It's a fish thing. It's a fish thing.
So when we go up the lake, so in the lake we're going miles per hour.
Right.
Do we go 20 miles up the lake or do we go 20 kilometers up the lake or 40 kilometers up the lake? Do you think about lake distance now?
Wow, that's a good one. I think you might be onto something because I think we go 20 kilometers up the lake at 20 miles per hour.
That's what I'm thinking. We're a bunch of whack jobs. Wow, that was too much hippie shit in our younger day, I think, something like that. That's
So 68 Fahrenheit or 20 Celsius. That's the limit for
that's
speckled
up there.
trout.
To me, I would think they'd be dead. I didn't even think they could go at 61. Let's say 63 or 64.
Yeah.
I thought they would die, but I'm not a biologist and I don't really know their temperatures. But
Now, keep in mind that the real home for brook trout, real native brook trout, live in lakes that have got upwellings, right?
Yeah.
So spring-fed
lakes.
cold.
They're all
spring,
cool
right.
to cold.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
But these little ones that we're talking about in the little creeks and the beaver dams and stuff, maybe they're the ones who can get up to 68. Because you're right, I wouldn't have thought that they could even get up that high.
They said scientists studied the trout during 2 summer heat waves in 22, July and August. During the second heat wave, the trout adjusted faster, showing they learned from past heat stress. So it wasn't so well adjusted in the July one. Then in August, all of a sudden, they're doing better in that second heat wave. So they're already adjusting in that one quick period. So they can do it, I guess. Then they compared them in here. I think it was a comparison to browns. Yeah, brown and rainbow trout are more heat tolerant. So brown trout and rainbow trout can handle warmer water better than brook trout. Brown trout can survive up to 75 Fahrenheit, 24 C, and rainbows 77 and 25 Celsius before experiencing stress. So these numbers are all higher than what I ever thought. But, because to me, when you hear that 75 Fahrenheit, you're thinking largemouth bass now. You know what I mean? That's bass water right there. It's warm. It's shallow, weedy warm.
Interesting article. You want more of that? I give you more of that. Hey, you want more?
I want more, Angela. Give me a bit of the more.
It's all at fishingcanada.com, folks. We
awesome.
don't do justice to these stories, as you could probably tell.
No, we just kind of introduce them, and then you can go, if you're interested, you go to
Yeah.
fishingcanada.com and you get the real deal.
Speaking of real deal, fan question of the week, my friends, brought to you by fishfindermounts.com.
Come on now.
Fishfindermounts.com.
We're going to be mounting some new stuff on our boat pretty soon. I can't wait.
That's coming up.
Are we going to do anything different this year on our boats? Do you think?
I'm thinking. I'm
just
like
thinking a couple of tweaks on our boat, but just not much, just because it was pretty damn good last year. But you can live and learn, right?
You sure can.
I like that.
Fishfindermouse.com brings you the fan question of the week. And of course, this is the one that if you do all the right things and your planets and stars align, then you could win something. Is that the deal on this?
That's right.
Is that the way it works?
How do we discover if the planets are all aligned?
They have to be publicly subscribed to us.
Publicly subscribe to us.
And you have to leave a question that you guys deem appropriate.
Okay, but did I not also say the last episode that we need to have them show us proof that they're listening to the show?
So I'm no longer reaching out to people.
Perfect.
I'm waiting for them to come to us and say, "Hey, I heard myself on the show."
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Do we don't even need proof at that point.
No.
They just need to say, oh, wait a minute. No, that's not going to work, because you know what's going to happen.
buddies-
Everybody who ever submitted a question is going to send a note to you, say, hey, I heard myself on the show. And you're going to say, no.
BillyBobThornton.com. That's me.
Exactly.
Okay? Come on now.
Yeah, I will need to require probably a screenshot of the episode.
A screenshot.
Yeah.
A screenshot is all you need.
Yeah.
Somebody sends you a screenshot, and they qualified through all of the other things that they needed to do, and they were chosen by us to be prize-worthy.
Yeah. And in
then
cases
they're
like
good.
this, we're probably going to need confirmation of their real name, because this guy used a fake name.
Well,
Maybe.
okay, but if he gets a screenshot, oh, wait a minute. But that would be-
Passport? Maybe they got to give us their passports.
No, we'll have to think about that.
Yeah.
Because what's stopping him from taking a screenshot of this
Yeah, and
Of
say,
course.
hey, it's me.
and then submitting
gotta-
it?
yeah.
Oh, but wait a minute. Oh, because you don't know where this person really lives, do you?
No.
No.
Okay, so they have to submit a screenshot, and you have to give them some ID of some sort where you live, so we can.
If you use a fake name, yeah, you're going to have to,
Yeah.
to prove your identity to us.
Don't screw us over, people.
No.
Because I guarantee you, if we find out, you're going to be screwed
Yeah.
way worse. We are going to get you bad on this podcast.
So if you're Redfisher 3142, Redfish, that's a catchy little
I like that.
name there, isn't it?
On YouTube.
On
That's his
YouTube.
YouTube handle.
And you submitted this question. And the question is, we have all heard that regardless of water body, a walleye is a walleye. However, have you come across a situation where this was not true and the walleye on a particular body of water reacted differently? In other words, the walleye was not a walleye. A situation where typical walleye tactics and presentations did not work, but rather atypical or even weird tactics worked best. Do you think the reason for this was due to environmental causes, fishing pressure, or perhaps other reasons? I don't know about that.
I have one that came to mind, and didn't you tell me once about a topwater thing you were doing for walleye once?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's kind of in that lane.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not a walleye. It just means that under those conditions, that's what walleye do.
I
In that body of water.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have we talked about it? Not so much lately, but we used to talk about it all the time, this crazy pattern on the Bay of Quinte for walleye in the dark, throwing topwater or just subsurface baits and then smacking it on the surface.
Yeah.
So walleye, when the frogs are migrating in the fall, generally, it's usually a frog migration. Probably not so much anymore, as there's less and less frogs that are migrating. But when they used to migrate a lot and go into the late fall, late October-ish, and they would go into the lake.
At night, yeah.
Just at night. That's when walleye would
They
predate
smashed
on.
topwater
Oh,
stuff. Yeah, they'd
big time.
hear them slurping, and then
Yeah.
guys were taking advantage of that, throwing topwater for walleye,
Big time.
which is a crazy one. But I mean, is it crazy? A walleye is an ultimate predator. There's no difference really between a walleye and a muskie, let's say, or a pike. I mean, these are fish with teeth that need to eat, and they will do what it takes to get. I mean, maybe a walleye won't eat a muskrat. Okay, I get that, but you never know. Either they might eat a mouse, but he's eating frogs, right? So, but they're a predator. Don't be fooled by that. What I would say to Redfisher here is that. It took me a long time to figure it out, but I can honestly say that on most lakes in Canada, I think there are two basic populations of walleye. There are the pelagic walleye and there are the structure walleye. There are these fish, these walleye that are hanging on rock piles. They're typical on a rock pile, on a rock point and all that stuff, and they live their whole life. They do that every year, spawn, come back out, and hit on structure, the bottom fish. And then there's, what do you call it, there's a name for the bottom structure fish.
Oh.
We had it on the show.
Benthic.
Benthic. That's the benthic. And then the pelagic fish are the ones that are open water roamers. They just follow balls of bait, minnows, shad, cisco, whatever it takes, perch. Doesn't matter to them. They're, as long as these fish are up off the bottom, the walleye will be up off the bottom for their beta. So think of it that way right off the bat, because I never used to think of that. I mean, Ange, you were the same way as I. we used to just fish structure, continuously structure. And now all of a sudden, every lake we're going to, even in northern Ontario, there is tons.
Even more so in northern Ontario.
Yeah, they're like 40, 50 feet of water, and smooth basin at the bottom, and it's loaded with walleye suspended. So it's like, wow, where did these guys come from? Well, they've been there their whole lives, and they've been there forever. We just didn't discover them until 10 years ago or something like that. So yeah, that's the way I look at it. I mean, there's so many weird ones. Went to fish Hay Lake. Remember Phil Morlock's Hay Lake? I was fishing largemouth bass in a 3-foot channel, and I was slamming walleye on a spinnerbait. I mean, tons of them in there like that. So there's so many situations. Max Hamish. Remember that? It was Sandy Point. There's a big sandy point that comes out. Yep. These walleye are all sitting on sand. There's nothing there.
I think walleye is probably the most adaptable, versatile hunter in the water system.
Yeah.
I think
sure
they
are.
Unlike some fish, and largemouth bass being one, smallmouth bass being another, muskie. Unlike those creatures that kind of do have their preferred methodology for consuming protein, I think walleye is that one species that is totally unpredictable.
They're very
it depends
adaptable.
on what's going today, right?
Absolutely.
What's going today, and that's...
Today, right now, the Detroit River is ripping, and they're all starting to go through there, and you're fishing them in 3-mile-an-hour current, and you're dropping a jig down with plastics, and pop, 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 and they're getting all these fish. Yeah. It's a very diverse fish for sure.
All right, this next segment, my favorite of all shows, Little Fish Talk with the Doc, brought to you by Sail, the outdoor stores. Sail is your home for all good things fishing, hunting, camping, and otherwise spending time in the outdoors.
Yes, and I agree with you. That is a very fun, it's something to look forward to when we get the Doc on here. Is it not?
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Especially today. A lot of questions. But anyways, if you don't have a Sail store near you, go online. Sail.ca, and you can order stuff shipped right to your home.
Yeah.
They even have sales going on as we speak.
Sales at Sail.
Some items up to 60% off. There you go. Now it's time for the Doc. Stephen Cooke is his name, Dr. Cooke, that is, biology professor at Carleton University. Published. Now, this is the part because we had it wrong half the year. We had 700 peer-reviewed papers. It's 1,200 paid review peers.
That's easy for you to say. And probably pretty soon to be 1,300 if I know Stephen, because he's a very hard worker, right? Soon to be very 13-ish.
Stephen, we missed you at the Sportsman Show. You were vacationing?
Yeah, I was doing family duties, but hoping next year. So
it's got to be done. It's got to be done. Did you go south for the winter break, or?
Yep, yeah, headed to Dominican Republic. The closest got to fish was snorkeling, so sadly did not wet a line. So.
Oh well.
Before we get to today's subject, there is something that I ran into last week, and I mentioned, boy, if only Dr. Cooke was
here. At the Sportsman Show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ran into a gentleman that is a bit of a conservationist, obviously by heart. He purchased just a huge parcel of wilderness. I think 60,000 acres.
Yeah, I think big chunk of land.
Big chunk of land, and pristine, beautiful, wonderful. And I won't say much about the location. You know it extremely well, but it's just perfect. It's a wonderful. We'd all love to have this land, and it's chock full of lakes with fish, lots of fish, big fish, bass to be exact. And we said, well, that's great. When we first started talking to him, I could see the potential, of him buying all this land. He could develop a little bit of it, but then keep most of it pristine and maybe make it like a bit of a preserve or maybe charge a few bucks. Maybe people want to go backpacking or kayaking, fishing for bass, like all that. I had all this stuff.
Yep. Pick me.
None of the above. He wanted to talk to us to see if we could help him come up with an effective way of eradicating all of the bass.
No, not all the bass.
No.
Not all the bass.
Not all the bass. Most of the bass.
2 pounds and under.
Yeah. He wants to.
The only way we can go fishing there, Stephen, is if you kill every 2 pounder under that you have to bring them out. And he says, I know you'll catch them, so you can't lie to me.
And I just about had another heart attack when this guy I just blew my mind.
But then he also did say, but the reason being there's so many small ones, but there is sixes, sevens. He says there's even the odd 8-pounder in these lakes.
But he doesn't want a trout is his love, and he wants to fill these lakes with trout.
Yeah, that was my assumption, is that it was going that way. Right. So yeah, I think it's pretty clear to everybody. You need baby bass to have adult bass. Old bass die eventually. So you can get rid of all the ones under 2 pounds, but at some point, then all the bass disappear again, if that's the point, because stock them and so on, but stock trout. But the Ministry of Natural Resources still on private lands like that still does have a role to play. Most waters are connected, and so one can't quite be Johnny Appleseed and hobby resource manager without also coordinating with our friends in the government to make sure that decisions that are being made are good ones. So
that's a good point.
Apparently, he had talked to Dr. Ridgway, about trying to find out how to eradicate bass and what's the best way to get
Did he want to get them out of every lake that he had?
Except one.
Except one.
Yeah, he's got one lake that he says, I would probably keep bass there, because they're. But his point, as we started discussing this with him, we got, I think, closer and closer to his dream, and that is to create the ultimate trout fantasy. The ultimate trout waterway that he can, regulate different types or maybe species or size of trout in various bodies of water, and that's really what he bought this land to do. And we're trying to, of course, I jumped right off on him and I said, listen, maybe you ought to take a few years to think about it and lease me that property.
Exactly.
Let me lease it from you for a few years and let's see what we can do. Because the way he taught, and he showed us a video, by the way, there is some pretty spooky big fish in there. And the way I looked at it, if it's possible to have private waters in Canada, that because I'd always heard that if you can navigate through water and not touch land, that there is no off limits for people.
Trespassing,
right? Yeah. So I thought, this would be the perfect place. We all dream of going to Mexico for giant bass. Well, what if we didn't have to dream that big and that long? We could do it right here in Canada.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Imagine?
Right?
I'll tell you, and Stephen, the video that we saw, that Ange and I saw, this water, it looked like trout water. It was so crystal clear. It was unbelievably clear. And here he was fighting a largemouth bass in this water. I mean, obviously largemouth can live in it, but it looked like perfect trout water too. I don't know if it was spring fed or anything like that, but maybe not for brookies, but I'm sure rainbows could live in that stuff, no problem. I don't know the temperatures, we don't know anything about it, but it was just clean, rocky, and logs. It was just like perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, we do some work in the Cooke Reserve in Quebec.
Yeah, we've been there.
Montebello area.
Yeah, we've been there.
And they have a number of lakes. So they have their own fish hatchery where they raise trout, brook trout, and rainbows, and they stock them in lakes. But they also have bass in a bunch of those lakes. Mm-hmm. And they coexist. Obviously, the bass will put a hurt on the smaller ones. So once they get past a certain size, they're fine. But a lot of that is supported by the hatchery efforts. There's not a whole lot of natural reproduction. So it does allow you to tailor the fishery. So, hey, this one we want lots of little ones for maybe novice anglers. This one we want to focus on trophy fish. So fewer but larger animals that people can try and target. So. Yeah.
So it is possible to kind of create your own world that you control. Then you can actually pull that off.
To some extent. Of course, Mother Nature doesn't always agree with what one wants to do. There's always wrenches that get thrown into things. Temperature means everything, and we've talked about that before. So, good temperature years, bad temperature years, harsh winters, light winters. But it's when, and I think we're going to talk a fair amount about the concept of carrying capacity today.
Right.
But it's when different things happen. So something else gets thrown in, you think you know how the system works, and everything gets reshuffled. The world order, if you will, in that lake has to be reshuffled. And what does that look like? How does that work? And it takes time for it to come back to sort of this equilibrium state. So, and there used to be a time where fisheries managers tried to tailor lakes to specific things. We want this one to be a trophy lake. We want this one to be, more numbers. We want this one to be something different. The problem in Ontario is we have so much water that the regulations get awfully complicated when you have to do that. It ends up being, the regulation book ends up being as thick as a telephone book. And that drives people away from fishing. It doesn't bring them in, it pushes them away. All but the experts that are able to decipher the legalese in that telephone book thick regulation guide. So we've gone to this model where we tend to manage for the average. And so there are lakes that are winners, there are lakes that are losers. And so it's a bit harder to find those where this is the trophy lake and this is the one you go for numbers. At least it's not being managed that way. It's just sort of a function of chance that this one becomes this and this one becomes that. So, yeah.
That's interesting because I was thinking, today I was on the Ontario regs for a while. And for the most part, I get what you're saying. They kind of average it out, but walleye is the one fish that it doesn't seem that they average out. They seem to have up here is a little bit of a size difference. There's a slot. Here's there's all kinds of different numbers for walleye compared to everything else. Why is that? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, so walleye we harvest at levels that exceed anything else in this province. So as you know, there's most bass go back, the majority of pike go back, and so on. Walleye are the one that if it's legally harvestable, it's probably going to end up in a fry pan. And for good reason. They are awfully tasty. And so lake trout and lake trout's the other one that gets some special attention. But walleye in particular need to be monitored carefully to make sure that they aren't being pushed over the edge in terms of harvest or catch and release mortality. And based on, some of it's still learning. A lot of these tools that we use, and we're like, a slot limit here and a length limit there. Yes, it's science, but there's also an art to it, and we learn by doing. The fancy word is adaptive management, and it means you apply a regulation, you monitor, you learn, you adapt it, you change it, you continue to learn, and you keep sort of adjusting it till you get to where you want. And that's something that's not bad management, that's good management. That's being responsive to the system and adjusting as you need to. So a lot of what we do is that kind of adaptive management. And because there is a lot of uncertainty with fisheries science. We're fisheries scientists and fisheries managers aren't as good at our jobs as people think we are. It is really complicated, and we often get it wrong. But knowing that, one monitors and makes adjustments accordingly.
Right on. Okay.
At first, when you were talking like that, I thought, that'd be a nightmare, though, because every year we've got to figure out, how many what's the limit in this lake? Yeah. And that used to be 2, but now that one's
That's
3, or is that one 3, or is that one 4? But, as responsible anglers, that should be part of our job. Each year, if we're going into a body of water, there should be a certain amount of research, and if you don't, you screw up, you get charged. I mean, it's that simple.
Oh God,
really.
I'll bet you there's so many anglers that don't know the limits, the length limits, et cetera, all the little rules of each lake that they fish, each division that they fish.
We don't put enough importance on that. Right. If it was like Stephen was saying, where you do manage the resource based on today, not on history, you should be able to adjust that along the way. And if we as anglers were made to feel a little more responsible in that process, and that is check every time you go out to a new body of water each year, not last year, check and see what the regs are,
Right.
then it would
Right.
work.
Right.
But we're not conditioned to that, right? We've been let go for so long.
Chances are they are the same for the most part, but you do have to recheck. 'Cause
You
a lot of times,
recheck, just in
it's
case.
the third Saturday of
Right.
this, it's the 6
Right.
fish versus 3 fish conservation.
Exactly.
It's the same, but you do have to check.
For sure.
It's funny we're talking again about this because I put it in my phone every year, and I was looking at it the other day just to make sure everything's starting to open up. All the seasons are opening up now, so I have my zone 15, my zone 17, my zone 20. That's the main areas that I fish around here, and I put all the regs in there, the sizes in there. And if everybody did that, just copied it and took a picture of it, of that page or whatever like that, then you just look at it in your phone and say, "Boo!" I have notes, and you could just write walleye and it'll come up, sort of thing like that. And
Awareness.
Awareness. So might be a good point for people
and
to
then
do.
The other piece of the equation is the monitoring side. So one thing is when a reg's there is to comply with it, obviously. But the other thing is monitoring, and we don't have enough, fisheries assessment staff and M&R to do all that work. But we almost all have a cell phone in our pocket.
That's
and so there's more and more work being done so that we can use this as a scientifically valid ground truth way of collecting data about fishing effort. So where are people fishing, and then what they're actually catching, and then what they're harvesting. And a lot of people take pictures, they include length information. So that's becoming a treasure trove. So I think in the future, we're going to see fisheries management becoming more real time because we're getting data in more real time as more and more people switch to that approach. I don't know about you guys. Do you every fish you catch, do you enter it into an app? I don't, but I know a lot of people do.
No, yeah, that's catching on. I've heard a few people that are doing that constantly, which is great resources to have because as an angler, obviously you want to be able to rely on historical data. Year after year. So it's good for that, and it's also good, obviously, for future. I think it'd be a great way for M&R, and I'm surprised they haven't done this already, maybe reward people by having them download an M&R app where people do register each one of their catches.
Sure.
And make a note as to whether that fish was released or consumed. What a great tool that would be for counting numbers and counting inventory.
Yeah, and creel surveys. So I don't know if you've ever been on the water and somebody comes up with a clipboard.
Yep.
But it's never one person. It always has to be 2 or 3 for safety. It's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And it has to be randomly stratified. So you also have to go out there on days when it's, dark and cloudy and nobody is fishing and record that nobody's fishing. We're getting better with using drone technology for that kind of thing as well. So you can fly overhead and count boats and anglers, but cell phones give us more than just the number of people out there. It tells us what people are targeting, what they're catching, the catch rates, how many fish per unit time, how big they are. I think you'll see things become that we're going to harness that technology for good over the next decade or so.
Angelo and I, to everybody listening, Angelo and I are going to start this system just in Fishing Canada. Any 5-pound largemouth or smallmouth bass, we just want a picture of it and the waypoint where you caught it. Every one of them in the southern.
Well, it should give us the pattern.
And the pattern, and maybe take a picture of something on the shoreline in the area.
And is there anything wrong with that?
And a screenshot of your fish finder and stuff like that. That's pretty good information.
I need seed so that I can validate the data too, please.
You got it, buddy.
Perfect. Yep. All right, getting a little closer to what we
Can I do one more question to backtrack on Stevens, what he said earlier?
Yep.
Stevens, this has always intrigued me. When you said, as Ance brought up, the bass being out, the trout being in these lakes, you said because the big bass will eat the small trout. Is there ever an instance where the big trout will eat small bass? Because it never gets talked about, ever. And I don't know if they would or not, so...
Yeah, I'm sure, but that implies that. So yes, but probably not at a level that's meaningful. And there's places where the bass would be able to hide in a lake. So back in the warm, swampier areas where they'd be able to get away from trout, where a brookie or a rainbow would be unlikely to go. I think a lot of it also comes down to the fish themselves. And so a hatchery fish doesn't have the street smarts that a wild fish does.
Wild.
And so when you throw in a bunch of brook trout that are 7 or 8 inches long, and they swim in circles looking for trout chow for the first couple weeks, they're extremely vulnerable to predators. So it's easy pickings for something like a largemouth. We do very little bass stocking in this province. There's no public hatcheries, although in the most recent hatchery update, they did say they were going to put some effort towards raising largemouth in hatcheries, which I assume is for urban fisheries, like small ponds, that kind of thing. But by and large, it's wild production here. And yeah, I think it's the hatchery fish are as big of an issue as them being trout. I think it's the fact that they're hatchery morons, at least till the easy pickings are gone and the ones that are a little bit more savvy survive the first couple of weeks.
Because you think a trout would, I see it like a fry ball or something like that. They just smash into that.
They have to be in the same location for that to happen, right? They're not.
Yeah.
That's like a lion. Can a lion kill a tiger? Well, if they lived together, you might find out.
Apparently a tiger. Well, see, because the lion's mane protects its throat.
Anyways, so one of the other things that came out in conversation with this person that we met was that, because originally he said that he wanted to do it solely because he wanted to stock trout in these lakes, which apparently were originally there at some point in time in our history. Bass were the invasive species, and they moved in and displaced trout, not trout displacing bass, right? So we already have evidence that does take place.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing that he said, well, I have to do it anyways because they have eaten themselves out of house and home. There's just no food left. And so they're cannibalizing. They're eating themselves. And my answer to that was, so what? I mean, protein is protein, whether it's a little baby bass or whether it's a minnow or a frog. It doesn't matter. It's protein. So what do you care? Yeah. Let them eat themselves.
They're doing what he wants us to do.
Right, exactly.
Right? The big bass are doing what he wants us to do.
So, which leads us to the question today. Are we in a situation now where we're managing the resource, and I'm talking bass in particular, but we could extend this to walleye too, where we're managing it so well, and maybe the mortality rate is so low on our releasing of fish that we maybe run into this danger where, number one, the fish are being stunted because they're just not having a chance to grow to any size because they're eating each other in most cases. They're cannibalizing on themselves. Is this a net result of catch and release? Possibly.
Yeah. So let's go back and think about a planet without humans on it.
Okay.
And so we've got a lake, again, no humans, but a lake, and there's fish in it. Maybe it's even, it's bass and walleye and, a bunch of minnow species and bluegill and crappie and so on. Over time, the individual populations of the different species will change, the size of those populations. And that's because of variation in the environment, competition within a species and between species, disease outbreaks, and so on. And so a population, even without humans on this planet, is never stable. And so things are always oscillating. And then it's not just one species that oscillates, it's the other. And so you have these sort of peaks and valleys. If you put a line through it, they're generally flat.
Okay.
But there's good years and bad years, good decades and bad decades. And that is something that that's just sort of what happens in ecology. And so when we as humans do things on top of that, it could be modify the environment. So we alter the shoreline to the point where there's less places for bass to reproduce. So all of a sudden there's fewer bass getting into the population. So we start to see the bass one oscillating downwards. But then the walleye population. The government puts on a regulation to limit fishing, and all of a sudden that one starts to increase. And then perhaps that then puts more pressure on the bass, which then drives them down, or vice versa. So all of these things that we do as humans, either as management actions or incidentally, just as we go about doing what we do, or what Mother Nature does, whether it be with a virus or with a good weather year or a bad weather year, all of those things create this chaos, if you will. So, and that's really sort of the state of all of our water bodies out there. There's not much that's truly stable. It's always changing. Something is always changing. And managers have these levers. So they basically can, I'll play with this lever, but the goal is to do something for walleye, but it cascades because it also influences those others, because everything eats something or is eaten by something or competes for space or other resources. So I'm trying to take several chapters in an introductory ecology textbook and distill it down to 1 5-minute blathering. So hopefully that was reasonably loose.
That's good, because I had no idea on that.
But it's true.
It's so true. Yeah.
And how about the cannibalism part? Is there a possibility that, let's take bass, because we're talking about bass, but this could apply to anything. Is there a possibility that the protein consumed through eating themselves is not quite what their system requires? So can their health be downgraded if they're eating, say, 80%, 90% themselves, as opposed to a variety of species of food that they might consume on a weekly basis?
Yeah, cannibalism is well documented and very common in largemouth bass. We do a lot of pond experiments in Illinois when I was doing some of my graduate studies down there. And we would drain ponds at the end of the summer to look at the baby bass. And you would have a bunch of fish that were 1 inch long, and you would have a bunch of fish that were 4 inches long. And so the 4 inches were the cannibals. And they ate their brothers and sisters. Wow. And they did just fine. So, so yes, that happens. No particular issue, at least with bass and their ability to grow. They're getting the nutrients that they need from that. The bigger issue is when you have lots of big fish that are enough to basically tamp down all the little ones. So eventually there is no more food. They're all big and can't eat each other. And that's when you start to see starvation. And that's when diseases come in. And that's when you can see a population collapse.
Calling Lake,
Lake,
Alberta.
Yeah, that's a perfect example for walleye.
We've witnessed that. We've actually been on a body of water where we were right in the middle of it happening, and it was the most bizarre looking thing. I mean, it's still to this day, they were zombie walleye. They had the heads of, I don't know, a 4 or 5 pound walleye, and these little emancipated, like the bodies were like a snake, like a little wee thin trail of a body. Yeah. But you could not drop your bait in the water without 2 or 3 walleye jumping all over it. It was bizarre. So they were starving.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And one of the reasons on that lake is that they had a 0 retention rate, right?
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So this lake, you could not keep anything. Everything was released for as long as we could remember. It was strictly a sport fishery that you go in and have at it. And I think now, a few years after we visited,
2 or 3 years later,
they opened it up to, I think, 3 fish, maybe even 4 fish, because there was no food left, Stephen. It was the most bizarre thing you've ever seen. Nothing, 0, not even themselves. Right?
Yeah.
So,
hey, Stephen, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Just quickly, I'll say that, again, going back to that, imagine a planet without humans on it, that would happen. Every once in a while, there would be lakes where literally there would be that level of population crash for various reasons, where that equilibrium gets disrupted and all of a sudden, everything's gone until there's a new recolonization event, and it things eventually come back to some new ecosystem, that's built from the bottom up.
Right.
But in today's world, with fisheries management, we should be able to prevent that from happening. And sometimes that means us playing God. That means, realizing, and that's what fisheries regulations are in many ways, right? We want to be able to reasonably use and harvest resources in a sustainable way. And sometimes that means regulations focused on the target species, so walleye. But sometimes it means thinking about what walleye need to succeed, as in food, as in appropriate spawning gravel. And so it may mean, for fisheries management, it may mean nothing to do with the regulation. It may mean let's put in some gravel spawning shoals, or let's focus on habitat enhancement that protects baby fish over winter so that the babies can make it to the point where they don't fit in the mouth of those adult walleye and there's places for bait fish to hide. So although when we think about fisheries management, like people, we manage because we care about bass, we care about muskie, we care about walleye, but fisheries managers actually have to think about the system as a whole, because if you focus just on the walleye, you don't have much you can do. You basically can, how many can you just make sure people don't take too many, but you're forgetting about the habitat and the ecosystem, which the walleye depend on. All that other stuff is the foundation. And if you don't have that, you're going to have that population that is slowly starving or being fished out or disappearing.
So what I was going to ask you, Stephen, when you said when the lake gets, most of the bait fish or whatever are gone, and it's just, let's say, just largemouth, and the big girls, all of a sudden the bigger fish are eating the smaller fish. In a situation, backtrack that so that the lake is full of bait fish, let's say 4-inch, beautiful 3 and 4 inch minnows. Who's the better predator, the smaller fish or the bigger fish? Because the smaller fish would be quicker,
There's more of them. There's more smaller fish.
There's more smaller fish. Let's say a group of 20 2-pound bass versus 10 4-pound bass. Is there a difference there at all?
Yeah, those little guys would certainly hammer them, I think. They'd probably be more likely to work together as well. The bigger, especially when we're talking about bass, they tend to become a little bit lazier and are looking for that one big meal as opposed to lots of little meals, has been my experience. So it's just, if you want big fish, you tend to throw big baits. It's not, it's not universal, but it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting. We've got a lake not far away that's going through everything that you've just mentioned, could be, would be, should be. A good friend of ours, Chris Hockley. Did Chris talk to you about Scugog? What's going on there? Oh my God!
Yeah, those emails you've been doing. It's craziness.
God. Just it used to be. We grew up on Scugog. It's 20 minutes away from us, right? So, it used to be one of the most incredible fisheries on the planet. It was guaranteed. It was fantastic, but that was the problem. It was guaranteed, and it was fantastic, and far too many of us, obviously, took advantage of that on a daily basis, and it now is going through some just incredible. And it's not just about over harvesting, although that has something to do with it. That was
the initial kind of shock, and then all of a sudden, okay, let's replenish. Oh, we can't now because now the environment is against that. It's
fallen prey to urbanization, right?
Exactly.
Port Perry has become a relatively significant urban center, albeit out in the boonies, but all the other little communities around it are growing. Farming is still quite important to that sector, and so they're still farming right down
runoff,
the shore.
Cow manure, the whole
everything.
9 yards.
It's just the perfect storm for disaster. Can a lake like that ever truly? Is there such a thing? Can we regenerate a body of water that's pretty much gone completely flat? Is it possible?
Yeah, we can, but it's hard. Yeah. And we call these, the reason is because we think of these as being tipping points. So, things are up here and all of a sudden you cross a threshold and you've gone from one state to another, and that new state, things start to become stable within that crappy new state.
Right.
And the inertia it takes to push it back to that better state is really, really tough. And so preventing systems from flipping or tipping or collapsing, however you want to think about it, is way less expensive and easier to fix than waiting for it to go downhill. And these Scugog is just one example of a couple lakes that are, and there's others in Ontario that are on the doorsteps of big, areas where there's lots of people. And it's going to take a few bad news stories for us to really start to think how we manage these water bodies and the lands around them. And you hit all of, you can't manage the fish in that lake simply with harvest regulations and think you're going to fix it. It means working with farmers to put in buffer strips in those upland areas, kilometers or miles away from the actual from the lakes, working with shoreline owners to make sure that not everybody's turning their front, the space in front of their cottage into a concrete retaining wall with beach inlay. So all of us contribute because we all eat food and we all live in dwellings. So this is sort of where, it's not just for the fish, it's for the waters and it's property value. So people should care. Your property value goes downhill if your lake isn't swimmable and fishable. Right. And we're getting to that point, sadly, in some of our waters.
Yeah. You got that. Scugog is in particular for sure. Yeah. Stephen, what about other species? For instance, north of here, so Scugog might be an example, but it's even further north of here and through the Haliburton area, all that. There's a lot of small lakes with a lot of small muskies. I went to 3 or 4 lakes last year where I caught multiple small muskies on these lakes, like fishing bass. Does that become a problem when there's so many of these smaller muskies? They don't get big in these lakes. The big one would be a 36-incher, 38-incher, something like that. They're not trophy muskies at all, but they seem to be replenishing over and over and more better than any other species. Are they dangerous to walleye and to bass, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, they're certainly predators and will eat anything that fits in their mouth, barely. The challenge with muskie is there's not a whole lot that eats them. And they do, they are big animals and require a fair amount of food, but they're also living in areas that are on the edge of their range. They are on the northern edge of that muskie range. Mm-hmm. And with that means cooler temperatures. And so when water temperatures are cooler, you have less growth opportunity. Usually systems are somewhat less productive. Things move more slowly too. Growth rates are slower. It doesn't mean you can't have big fish up north, and you've caught huge fish up north. But those fish would be older than the same fish you would catch closer to where you and I are right now. So, right. So temperature can play a big role as well.
Could those fish, a small lake muskie, so a Minden, or anywhere up in the Haliburtons and that, these fish that seem to average this-ish, if you brought that fish, transported them to Eagle Lake or somewhere really a great muskie fishery, could they get the potential to be a 44-incher?
They get absolutely eaten. Those
they don't get eaten at that size, I don't think.
Yeah. Yep, that's about it's just like a fish bowl. If you if you have a small fish bowl, your fish won't get big. So, right. And in small lakes, it's partly the competition, but also realizing just the resources that are available and sort of adjusting accordingly.
Well, aquarium is a good point because we've all witnessed that, right? The fish will definitely
except for your
grow.
Catfish that you had.
Well, he came in big though.
But he got a lot bigger.
He did. He doubled his size.
But you're right.
But that's because he eliminated all of the competition.
And he got hand-fed pasta every day. So that was a big difference too.
We had a fascinating gentleman on the program and from California, a bass angling fanatic from California, and he's 100% convinced that the catch and release fishery that they've adopted so well in that state is blamed for the total annihilation of trophy largemouth bass. And he was telling us about, lakes that you could go to every day and you'd catch an 8, 9, 10-pound largemouth. You can't even get a 2-pounder. And there's lots of fish, but they just haven't been able to develop to the bigger size, and he's blaming it on catch and release fishery to the point where now he's promoting consumption of bass. He's coming up with recipes and different ways to prepare largemouth bass so that Californians can add that to their meals. But he's a big believer that catch and release is to blame for the reduction of size.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I'm going to use bluegill as an example because we've done the scientific community, have done a fair amount of work on them in ponds. They're good for pond experiments. And so there's work that shows that it's not that the way that stunting doesn't come from, at least in bluegill, and we assume that this spills over into other sunfish species, and bass are a sunfish species. And that's the idea that it's not more brothers and sisters that you're competing with, but it's the removal of old big fish that leads to early maturation. So if you're little and looking around and saying, wow, nobody else is making babies, and I've got the opportunity to do so now, I'm going to switch from growing and instead invest all of my energy in reproduction. And reproduction is costly. If you're a female bass, you have to make these, fatty, lipid-filled eggs. If you're a male, you have to have the energy reserves to guard a nest for 4 to 6 weeks, and they don't eat a whole lot during that period. So that's what at least the science says with bluegill. And again, by extension, I'm making some assumptions that we think it works the same way in bass. So is it a bad thing to harvest bass? No. A well-managed fishery should be able to encourage that. But what you would want to do in that case is to protect the big ones. And so, yes, there's a lot of 2-pound bass, but there's a few 3 and 4s hidden in that lake as well. You want to protect them and protect the ones that, as they move from 2 pounds to 3 pounds, 3 pounds to 4 pounds, because they will then start reproducing when, they're, allow those to be the ones that reproduce. They outcompete the little guys, and then you get the little ones growing bigger and investing in growth as opposed to reproduction. So
I think that's what he was saying, right? He was saying that he wanted to highlight the consumption value of those smaller 2-pound fish.
That's what he said.
Yeah. And so, he's on the right track. I just think it's a bizarre, for us anyways, we've lived all of our lives protecting bass. And to hear this notion that we should put them on the menu in restaurants just kind of blows my mind. But really, why not?
We do it with every other species, like walleye. We do it with trout. We do it with, you know what I mean? So they're it's just that mind frame we've had as tournament anglers. That's what happens.
It's hard to get out. It's hard to to get out
and
of that.
There's lots of examples where managers have put in regulations with a goal. Everybody's decided that, like Minnesota and Wisconsin, I think there's a number of examples where, managers have heard from constituents that we want this to be a trophy lake for pike. Right. And to do so, based on the population characteristics, we're going to put in this type of regulation. It's going to be a slot limit or a minimum size limit or whatever. They put it in and nothing changes because nobody's harvesting anything. So everybody is adhering to catch and release so much that the management regulation can't do what you want it to do. But the only mortality is a little bit of catch and release mortality and natural mortality. You're not able to direct harvest like you want to. And I can't think of any examples of that in Ontario, but I'm sure there have been.
You're damned if you do and damned if you don't, almost, right? That's wild. Anyways, it's a fascinating story. We've spent all of our lives, yourself included, teaching folks that we need to put stuff back and we need to be the stewards of our environment and fishery and wildlife, and we need to do this. And now maybe we've gotten too good at it.
Yeah.
And it's time to rejig the whole thing. And I also love the notion that you put forward, and that is that we should be able to make changes. Nothing should be in stone.
Oh God. Absolutely.
Should be able to make changes on the fly even. And well, how do you deal as an angler? How do you deal with that? Well, become responsible. Peter and I have been fortunate enough to talk to anglers on the other side of the pond. We've been fortunate enough to be at consumer shows in England and Europe and Italy and all the rest of it. And they still can't believe that we have this wide open, it's the Wild West to them, right? Yeah. This wide open fishery where anybody with a license, and then we tell them what it takes to get a license. They can't believe that. But anyways, anybody with a piece of paper that says they're legal to fish can stop anywhere and catch fish and keep some and release some, and they still can't believe it. Well, I think we've kind of taken it for granted here to the point where we should look at the model on the other side of the pond, because if we don't manage it properly, and in this case, properly is starting to sound like we maybe need to be a little more in tune with nature as opposed to total catch and release like we have been doing. Maybe each lake has to be looked at differently, and even taking one species in mind. So you can have a regulation for bass on Rice Lake, which is not necessarily the same as Pigeon Lake, because last year Pigeon had a terrible recruitment year and temperature, whatever it was, caused the problem. So we should be able to regulate sort of, and it's up to us as anglers to find out where and when those regulations are taking place. It wouldn't be that difficult,
Yep.
All online.
Yeah, the biggest way to think about the difference between, say, how European inland fisheries are managed and our freshwater fisheries here is that here in North America, we largely use harvest controls.
Right.
So we limit how many fish people can take from the system. Over there, we limit effort. So in Europe, it's effort that's limited. So you control the number of rods on the water. And it goes down to the point, especially with some of their sort of private access rules, that, you can buy, I'd like to buy 4 hours on that river for this beat, and you go and you fish it. And it may be they only allow somebody on that beat 3 days a week. For 12 hours total or whatever. So the challenge here is that notion, or the freedom that we enjoy in North America, of being able to do more or less what we want when we want, as long as it's legal, has spilled into, and certainly, how we think about natural resources as well. So as long as you're on public waters, there's usually no limit to how many people can go out there. The limit usually comes from when you get frustrated, when you show up at the boat ramp and there's a 3-kilometer line, or you're shoulder to shoulder to shoulder combat fishing for steelhead or something like that. That's usually when effort gets controlled, because people get frustrated and leave. That idea of license, a stamp, to fish muskie on this lake there, there's, we've got 100 stamps. You can buy them at the local tackle shop over there. And when the 100 stamps are used up, that's how many, there's no muskie fishing on that lake, or whatever the case may be. In general, that approach has been very unpopular in North America.
Maybe so, maybe so. But, now listening to you, it's starting to make a little bit of sense. Right, because if you are regulating effort as opposed to like limits, it's controllable.
Yeah.
Right, because if you have a 6-fish limit, see, this is the part I can never understand. You have a 6-fish limit on a body of water, but 6 times how many? Right, if there's no limit to the how many, as our populations of anglers grow, so does the harvest.
Yep.
But we're not.
And our ability, again, to use cell phones for me to text my buddy saying, wow, the fishing's great here, who then texts their buddy, who then, and all of a sudden there is that lineup at the boat ramp, and all of a sudden the fishing is crappy. And we see that in Canada. We think of it as a whack-a-mole approach, right? Where everybody hears that the fishing's good on this lake, everybody goes there, fishes the crap out of it, population goes down, everybody, some people start to wander around and look for other places, they find it, They have big mouths, they tell their buddies, and then everybody moves over there, giving the chance for this other one to rebound while this other one's getting hammered. And so it's this constant game of whack-a-mole. That's been well documented in rainbow trout fisheries, in lake fisheries in British Columbia, where they just show this complex dynamics of where people go and their behavior on the landscape based on what they hear, how the fishing is, and then how that changes over time, and then they move again.
Wow. That's crazy. You know, the one problem, Ange, I know we can be our own stewards and all that, but that only goes so far. We still do need more conservation officers out there.
Without question.
Out in the field to really keep, like when you see a cop on the road doing it with his radar gun, everybody slows down, you know what I mean? So it's unfortunate. We just have such a lack of, at least in Ontario, I don't know about the rest of Canada, but in Ontario, it's such a travesty to the amount of COs we have out in the field.
When was the last time that you and I ran into a CO in the field?
In Ontario or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while.
I was trying to think as we're going through. I was trying to think when. I mean, I can't even.
No, last year, Nordic Point Lodge. They came and checked us at the cottage at our camp.
At the camp. That's right. That's right.
Nordic Point. So we did get checked last year. The year before, probably not. Before that, probably not. But so
I'd even forgotten about that because it wasn't on water. It was on land. Yeah, they were doing It was a weird thing. They were checking people on land at the cabins.
Yeah.
As opposed to water. They were checking in the rooms or seeing if you had fish, all that stuff, right? But it was kind of bizarre. It was really strange. But think about it. That's a great place to bust somebody.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right? On land, you got your guard down.
Everybody, okay, let's get that cooler in here.
Let's
pull
get
them from under the console, the battery box.
Exactly.
Okay, boys, let's go. We're good now.
I forgot about that. That was very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So,
but we did hear. We had some good news last week at the Sportsman Show. We talked to that one CEO, the big fella. He said they actually have been doing some hiring in his area.
They have a few more at least.
A few more.
Yeah.
So
They need it for sure.
Gotta have it. So, bottom line, what do we do now? All right. So, how are we going to deal with this? Too much catch and release, not enough catch and release. Should keep some smaller fish. Should not. Tell us what to do.
Yeah. So follow the regulations and don't feel obliged to release every fish that's harvestable. There should not be an odium. Look at all the water we have in this province. If we can't have a couple shore lunches a year and have some fish in our freezer, we're doing something wrong. So obviously don't be gluttonous. Don't break the law, but harvest in reason. This is our blessing is the water and the bountiful resources we have here. And I think we've maybe shifted the needle too far where the assumption is that every fish, aside from walleye, gets released. And I think we need to normalize harvest. I love smallmouth bass. In a beer batter, it is so yummy. But my gosh, this is probably the most publicly I've ever said that.
I know you're
I would not throw a picture of me chowing down or cleaning a smallmouth on my Facebook feed. You're never going to see that.
So true.
Isn't that bizarre, though?
It's
Even
true.
You think the same way. Isn't that bizarre? Wow.
But I'd like to add to Stephen's point. So you definitely keep some fish, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, you don't always have to keep your limit. Remember that too. You know what I mean? You don't have to, I got to get my 6 in there and I got to take them home and all that stuff.
Catch your limit.
But limit your catch.
There you go.
Yeah,
exactly.
I remember that. I remember that from when I was a kid.
There you go.
Where did I hear that?
We brought that back at the Sportsman Show. We some folks here on the team decided that it'd be cool if they resurrected that whole logo and brand that we had in the 80s.
I loved it.
And people loved it. They loved it. So there you go. Perfect. Perfect timing for it.
Same vintage is hooked on fishing, not drugs. So
There you go.
That was
That's
good.
it. That's perfect.
My friend, I want to thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
One last thing is also think about the individual fish you're harvesting. So, hey, even when there's no length limits and you catch 10 fish, don't take the biggest.
Right.
Don't take the smallest.
Here.
Usually go for the ones that are in the middle. And there's good reason for that in terms of let the little ones grow big enough to at least reproduce once. Let those big ones stay because they've got the good genes that you want passed on so that you've got more big fish genes in the population. And the ones in the middle are also, they're the easiest to clean. They fit in the fry pan. It's the best flesh quality. You don't want to eat the biggest, oldest fish in the population. It's been living there for a long time, and it is slowly accumulating contaminants as well.
Yeah,
for better or worse, there are, that's just a reality in our world. You don't have to have a plant dumping pollution into a lake for it to be polluted because of precipitation. Things fall from the sky, and then just natural pollutants, methyl mercury from wood degrading and so on. So those fish in the middle are so perfect for so many reasons.
Well said.
Very well said. On that note, my friend, I want to thank you once again for joining us. And what's coming up? What's your next project, by the way? Can you share something with us?
Oh boy. So spring is here. It's like today, spring is here. We are already, we've got spring fever. So we're applying for our permits. We're doing our safety plans. We're getting our vehicle fleet refreshed. And we'll be hitting the water probably mid-April. We're going to be doing some telemetry work, tracking fish on Big Rideau, Charleston, Lake Openicon, everything from smallmouth, largemouth, lake trout on the bigger lakes that I just mentioned, some bowfin work on Charleston. And we do a little bit of bass removal work. Earlier you mentioned, on occasion there's need to remove bass. We're doing a project in Gatineau Park where there's a lake with endangered mollusks, freshwater clams or mussels, and they need small freshwater or small minnow species to be their host for the glaucidia to complete their life cycle, these endangered mollusks. And bass have been introduced into one small lake in one of the small lakes in Gatineau Park. And so we're trying to get them out of there. So, so we're doing that by locating the nests, fishing the males off, and then just putting a whole lot of fishing effort in. But it is a small lake. It's, about 3/4 of a mile long and 1/4 of a mile wide. Anything bigger than that, and it would be impossible.
Did you guys get your live scope unit yet? You were talking about getting live scope.
I know.
Get it, buddy? Come on here.
Yeah.
It's going to help you.
I'll tell you what, we'll make you a promise. You get a unit this year. Let us know when you get it. We'll see how our schedules can work out. We'd love to come out for an afternoon or a day and work with your staff and show you how this stuff works, because it's a game changer. All right?
Do it.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Good
Stephen.
seeing you.
Take care, buddy. Dr. Cooke, little fish talk with
Love
the
it.
doc. Never
Love
hurt
these.
anybody.
Like you said, it's a favorite part. It's never hurt anybody. That's for sure.
You can't get too much of it.
I could, honest to God, it's an 8-hour-a-day job right there. Just listening to him, that'd be perfect.
He'd be a blast out in the field.
Oh yeah, for sure.
His students must just love him, for sure.
Yeah, it'd be fun work.
Alrighty, keep an eye on fishingcanada.com for all of the latest contests, whatever they may be.
Come on now.
Yeah, we just launched that one at the Sportsman Show.
That's right. That baby was sitting right there.
You know what? I didn't. Was there a lot of excitement generated? We
had almost 1,000 people enter it right at this in the booth there.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow. It is certainly unique looking. There's no question about it.
It is.
I had a lot of people.
The new shape of the Mercs, that little pointed top and all that stuff, but yet very unique, nice white, and it looks electric. It looks
like an electric motor for sure. Does anybody know? It says 7.5E. Does that mean
electric?
7.5 horsepower?
I think so.
Does it?
I believe it does, yeah.
I believe it does? Okay. Because somebody asked me that the other day, and I didn't want to. I didn't know, so I didn't lie to them.
Do they give
what did you tell them?
Says, that's right. No, that's not what I asked you. If it was 7.5, I said 7.5. It says so right there.
The E is for easy. Come on, that's easy. You should know that.
Oh, boy. What else are we missing, Dean? We got everything?
Pete has a bonus code there.
Does he really?
He has a bonus code.
Well,
speaking of this lovely Mercury motor, the bonus code for this week is electric. ELECTRIC, all in capitals.
Look at
Come
you.
on now.
Electric. I'm an electrician.
Turn the paper over and do
I'm an
that.
electrician. I'm an electrician. Yeah, take that in. Get 10 free entries to the contest.
By the way,
I get a good chance of that sucker right there.
imagine that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a beautiful
That'd be a
win?
nice prize.
I don't know when this episode goes. What do they drop them, don't they?
Yeah, we
you
drop
drop
them.
these. You break many as you're dropping them.
Drop
or they don't?
the
just drop
needle.
Very smooth.
I want to reach out to all of you that came and joined us at the Sportsman Show this past week. Spend a bit of time with us. It pleases us to no end. You have no idea how much we enjoy chatting with you and spending time and exchanging war stories together. All of that stuff at these shows, and we really appreciate you coming out, man. It was great to see each and every one
Yeah,
of you.
it's very warm. I
love it.
We're all friends.
Give me a hell
Absolutely,
yeah.
Hell yeah.
absolutely loved it. So thank you once again for coming out to the live event for us. All right, that are it. On behalf of the entire crew of Volvo over there, Dean, Gene, Jim, Frank, Bill, Nick is over there somewhere
now.
and studying. And of course, he's Dean over there. You've seen him on the show.
Come on now.
Peter Bowman, I'm Anshel Bayal. Thank you, folks. Catch you next time. This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio has been brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Centre, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species. Freedom Cruise Canada, rent the boat, own the memories. J&B Cycle and Marine, your home for all things power sports, boats, and equipment. And Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures.